No cameras allowed. My career as an outlaw rock and roll photographer tells the story in words and photos of how Julian David Stone entirely by sneaking his equipment into concerts with more than 10,000 rock and roll photos. Here to give us a glimpse at his journey of writing his books is author Julian David Stone. Welcome to the show, Julian.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
An outlaw rock and roll photographer. You were sneaking your camera into shows. I want to hear all about this.
Sure. This started when I was a teenager. I loved rock and roll. Unfortunately, I couldn't really perform it. I found that out very quickly, but I also loved photography, so I thought, well, this would be a great way to integrate the two. It started at a Ramones concert when I was about 18. I showed up at the club with my camera bag over my shoulder, and the bouncer just laughed at me and said, "You are not coming in here with that." I went back to my car and I was about to dump the equipment, and I went, you know, there's got to be a way around this. And I hid the equipment on my body, got past the bouncer, shot the Ramones, and after that it started me on a journey over the next 5 years where I took about 10,000 pictures of all the biggest stars of the 80s.
Yeah, I guess you had to get creative and figure out how you were going to get that camera, and now you have this beautiful coffee table book. And obviously photos of some very iconic people. Who were some of your favorite artists that you photographed and why?
Oh boy, so many. I would have to say Prince was one of my all-time favorites. I shot him at sort of the peak of his career. This was Purple Rain.
Purple Rain.
He had the #1 album, the #1 movie, and by this point in my sneaking in techniques, I had gotten a gigantic pea coat that I had modified for hiding equipment on it. Well, because it was Prince, I decided to go out and get a brand new huge telephoto lens. It didn't come until the day before the concert, so I was in the parking lot with a friend getting ready. I would have all these pre-concert preparations. Well, the lens was too big to fit. So I couldn't get it anywhere to hide it. Well, this was back in the 80s and women's hair was really big, and I had gone there with a female friend. So I got this great idea. I put it in her purse, and we put a can of Aquanet on top of it.
Oh my goodness.
So we walked up to the guard. He saw us approaching, and she had this purse with this big bulging, cylinder in it, and he was like, "What is this all about?" Opened it up, saw the Aquanet, and he said, "Fine, go on in."
Wow, you're throwing it way back.
Yep.
But that's great. Wow, you're sneaking around and so you weren't taking the photos that we see in the book from your traditional the area where the photographers are allowed. You're actually in the crowd. And so from that vantage point, it really makes it unique.
Right. I was capturing the show the way the performer meant it to be seen. So many photographs when you shoot professionally, which happened at the very end of my career, you're in the very front row in the pit and you're basically looking up the performer's noses. I caught the show exactly the way the performer meant the audience to see it.
And you said you were doing this for about 5 years.
Yeah.
And so every time you were sneaking the equipment in and sort of, I guess, making your way through the crowd to find your pictures or take your pictures, was it exciting every time? Did it sort of lose its luster after you're like, I get away with this for 5 years?
No, it always, because you were always being, I was always under pressure of being caught, so it always stayed exciting. In fact, briefly I went pro at the end of it, and it wasn't near as much fun because I built up such a good portfolio. I started getting hired at the ripe old age of 21, and it wasn't the same. I love the excitement. I think, rebellion is such a part of rock and roll, and I think this was my way of connecting to that by sneaking in.
And so you hung up your camera, I understand, because you had an experience with Bruce Springsteen.
Yes, I shot Springsteen in the mid to late 80s, and this was again Bruce on the Born in the USA tour.
Yeah.
It was the last show of the tour in Los Angeles. So again, I got all this equipment in. I was about 15th row center, and I started shooting the show. And about a couple songs into it, I heard my camera make kind of a strange sound. And I didn't think anything of it because, the concert's going on, and I kept shooting. I shot about 20 rolls of film, and I ran back. At this point, I was in college. I ran back to my dorm. I went down into the dark room at the school, and I developed the rolls, and I started to pull them out one by one, and they were blank. And what had happened is my camera had malfunctioned, and the film wasn't getting exposed, and I decided that this was the sign that I needed to stop because I was in school to study film. Meanwhile, my rock photography career was taking off, and I was getting all these calls to shoot shows, but I didn't have time because I was trying to study film. So I said,
So it wasn't Bruce himself,
no,
but it was a
Bruce.
sign.
It was the sign that I couldn't sustain these two careers, even though the rock and roll career was quite
I'm sure your book
off.
is a great way for people to relive this era through your beautiful pictures. You said Prince was your favorite to shoot. What's your favorite photo that you've taken?
My favorite photo actually was also of Prince.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of other people in here, U2, Springsteen, Joan Jett, but it just happens that my favorite picture is I have a shot of Prince that I got at that same show where, he's standing like a rock god getting ready to do a mighty power chord, but because it's Prince, there's a big flowing pink boa as part of it, and that's my all-time favorite.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, jam-packed with rock and roll icons. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your book with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And for more information, visit juliandavidstone.com.